They believed it had ended. They overlooked what humans truly are. Part 1. The Fall. The 17 elder species of the galactic hegemony had ruled the stars for over 1 million years. They had seen countless younger races rise and fall. They had watched civilizations bloom and wither like flowers in a cosmic garden, but they had never seen anything like humanity. In just 300 years, humans had spread from their small blue world to 47 star systems. Their population grew at rates that made the elder species uncomfortable. Their technology advanced so quickly that it seemed almost unnatural. What took other species 10,000 years to develop, humans achieved in decades. The hegemony grew afraid. High of the stood before the Council of 17. His 4 eyes scanned the gathered representatives of the most powerful species in the galaxy. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of death. "They breed too fast," he said. "They think too quickly. They adapt too well. In another century they will challenge us. In 2 centuries they may surpass us. We cannot allow this." The debate lasted for 3 standard days. Some argued for diplomacy, others suggested containment, but in the end fear won. It always did. They called it Operation Quiet Dawn. Admiral stood on the bridge of the HSS Defiance, watching the stars drift past on the main. Her ship was an explorer, built for long journeys into the unknown spaces between galaxies. They had been out here for 2 years, mapping new systems and searching for signs of life beyond the hegemony's borders. She was 62 years old, her dark skin marked with the lines of a life spent in space. Her hair was cut short in the military style she had worn since her academy days. She commanded a crew of 300, and she loved them like family. "Admiral," her communications officer said, his voice strange and tight. "We're receiving emergency transmissions, multiple frequencies. They're coming from everywhere." Felt her stomach drop. "Put them through." The bridge filled with screaming. 100 voices, 1,000, overlapping in a chorus of terror. She heard words between the screams, words like attack and dying and help us and Earth. "Show me," she whispered. The changed. The Defiance's long-range sensors had captured footage from a relay satellite near Earth's solar system, watched as massive ships, hegemony vessels from a dozen different species, descended on her like vultures. She saw the planet crackers fire. She saw Earth split open, its continents breaking apart, its oceans boiling away into space. She saw the moon shatter into 1 billion pieces. She saw Mars burn, its terraformed atmosphere igniting in a single massive firestorm. The transmissions continued. Colony after colony went silent. Titan, Europa, the Belt Stations. Alpha, everywhere humans had built a home, the hegemony brought death. "Bioweapons detected on multiple worlds," her science officer reported, her voice hollow with shock. "They're targeting human DNA specifically. The plagues are. They're designed to kill only us." Could not move. She could not breathe. She watched humanity die, and there was nothing she could do. The assault lasted 3 days. 3 days of fire and plague and death. When it ended, the hegemony sealed the borders of human space. They destroyed the jump gates that connected human systems to the rest of the galaxy. They declared a quarantine zone 100 light-years wide. Then they waited. Within 6 standard months, the last human distress signals fell silent. The hegemony's sensors detected no signs of life in the quarantine zone. Their bioweapons had worked perfectly. Their planet crackers had left nothing but debris fields where worlds had once orbited. High addressed the galaxy. "Today, we have ensured peace for all species. The human threat has been eliminated. Let us remember this moment not with celebration, but with solemn acceptance of a necessary sacrifice." Monuments were built on 17. They called it the preservation of galactic peace. History books were written, explaining how dangerous humans had been, how their elimination had saved countless lives. Within a generation, young aliens learned about humans the way they learned about any other extinct species. A curiosity, a warning, a footnote. But the hegemony had made a mistake. The Defiance had been beyond the kill zone. So had 16 other ships scattered across the deep black on various missions, mining vessels, research stations, colony ships that had not yet arrived at their destinations. Gathered her crew on the observation deck. Through the windows, the stars looked the same as they always had, cold, distant, indifferent. Earth is gone, she told them. Our families, our homes, everything we knew. The hegemony has killed billions of our people. They think they've killed us all. A young ensign was crying. An old engineer stared at nothing, his face empty. The ship's doctor held the hand of a woman who had collapsed. We have a choice, continued. We can return to human space. We can die with our people. Perhaps that is the honorable thing to do, she paused, or we can live. The word hung in the recycled air. If we live, we must hide. We must run. We must never stop moving. It will be hard. It will be painful. Many of us will not survive. But if even one human remains alive, then humanity is not extinct. If even one child is born, then the hegemony has failed. She looked at her crew. These 300 people were all she had left. I cannot make this choice for you, but I know what I choose. I choose spite. I choose survival. I choose to make the hegemony's victory a lie. The vote was not unanimous. 37 crew members chose to return to human space, to die among the ruins of their civilization. Did not stop them. She gave them a shuttle and all the supplies they could carry, and she wished them peace. The rest stayed. The Defiance powered its engines and turned toward the empty spaces between galaxies, where no one would think to look for survivors. Behind them, the stars of human space grew dim and distant. The hegemony believed it had ended. They had recorded humanity's death and moved on to other matters. They did not know about the Defiance. They did not know about the other ships scattered across the black. They had overlooked something important. Humans did not die easily. Humans carried their hope like a weapon and their grief like armor. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended them 100 times over. The hegemony would learn this lesson, but not yet. For now, the Defiance flew on, carrying its precious cargo of survivors into the dark, and made a promise to the stars: humanity would return. They believed it had ended. They overlooked what humans truly are. Part 2: The Scattered. 40 years passed in the cold dark between stars. The hegemony celebrated anniversaries. Politicians gave speeches about peace. Children learned about the human danger in their history classes. The quarantine zone became a ghost story, a place marked on star charts with warnings and legends. Ships that entered rarely returned, and those that did spoke of debris fields and silence and a strange feeling of being watched. Most believed the zone was haunted by the dead. They were half right. Admiral was 72 years old now. Her hair had gone completely white. Her hands shook when she was tired, but her eyes were still sharp and her voice still carried the weight of command. The Defiance had grown. 17 ships now followed her through the void, carrying 12,000 survivors. They had found each other over the decades, guided by coded signals and desperate hope. Mining ships, research vessels, a luxury liner that had been carrying tourists when the attack came. Even a hegemony prison transport, its human prisoners having overpowered the guards in the chaos. 12,000 souls, all that remained of a species that had once numbered 50 billion. They never stayed in one place for long. They had learned that lesson early, when a hegemony patrol had almost found them near a brown dwarf star. Now they moved constantly, harvesting resources from dead systems, trading with the rare smugglers who did not care about politics, and always watching the dark for signs of pursuit. A generation had been born knowing nothing but the fleet. Children who had never seen a planet, never felt real wind or rain. They grew up on stories of Earth, of blue skies and green forests and oceans so vast you could not see the other side. To them, these were fairy tales, beautiful lies told by old people who remembered a world that no longer existed. Watched these children and felt her heart break a little more each day. Far across the galaxy, on a moon called 3, a young scientist named was breaking the law. The hegemony had restricted access to human cultural archives. The official reason was contamination risk, the fear that human ideas might somehow infect other species. The real reason was simpler: guilt. The archives contained too much beauty, too much evidence that the species they had destroyed had been more than just a threat. Did not care about the law. She had found a way into the restricted files, and what she discovered there changed everything she believed. She listened to human music. She read human poetry. She watched human films, stories of love and loss and hope that made her weep in ways she had never wept before. How could a species so young create such things? The humans had existed for barely a heartbeat compared to the elder races. Yet their art spoke to something universal, something that transcended species and biology. She began to ask dangerous questions. She researched the Quiet Dawn operation. She found inconsistencies in the official records, and slowly, carefully, she began to suspect that the hegemony had not just eliminated a threat. They had murdered something precious. Deep within the quarantine zone, in the ruins of human space, something else was growing. The hegemony's bioweapons had been designed by careful scientists who understood human DNA perfectly. But they had not understood humans perfectly. They had not accounted for the miners who lived in sealed habitats on airless moons. They had not considered the deep space stations with independent air supplies. They had not imagined that anyone would survive the planet crackers by being underground when they struck. Millions had survived, perhaps tens of millions. They had fled into asteroid belts and hollow moons. They had sealed themselves into bunkers meant to survive nuclear war. They had done what humans had always done when faced with extinction. They had refused to accept it. 40 years of survival had changed them. They were harder now, leaner, stripped of everything unnecessary. Their children learned to fight before they learned to read. Their engineers built weapons from salvage. Their scientists developed technologies the hegemony had never imagined, born from desperation and spite. They called themselves the Remnant. The leader of the Remnant was a woman named Wei. She had been 12 years old when the attack came, hiding in a bunker beneath the Martian surface as the world above her burned. She remembered the screaming. She remembered the silence that came after. She had sworn an oath that day, watching the red dust settle over the graves of everyone she loved. Someday the hegemony would pay. Someday the screaming would be theirs. The three threads of humanity's survival came together by accident. The Defiance needed fuel. Their reserves were critically low and had authorized a desperate resupply run to an abandoned mining station on the edge of the quarantine zone. It was a risk, but they had no choice. A hegemony patrol found them. The captain of the patrol vessel was unnamed. She had been born after the Quiet Dawn, raised on stories of human danger. Her orders were clear. Any humans found alive were to be eliminated immediately. She locked weapons on the human ships. Her finger hovered over the firing control, and then she hesitated. In the archives she was not supposed to access, had found human music. One song in particular haunted her, a lullaby sung by a mother to her child. The words were in a human language she did not understand, but the emotion needed no translation. She had listened to that song 100 times. She had wept without knowing why. Now she looked at the human ships on her screen, 12,000 survivors, families, children, the last of a species her people had tried to destroy. She lowered her hand. "Sensor malfunction," she reported to her crew. "I'm reading nothing but debris. Log it and move on." The human ships vanished into the dark, watched them go, knowing she had just committed treason. But she also knew something else, something the hegemony had tried to bury. Humans were not monsters. They were artists and dreamers and fighters. They were capable of terrible things, yes, but also of beauty that made the stars weep. And they were still alive. Somewhere in the galaxy continued her forbidden research. Somewhere in the quarantine zone, the remnants sharpened their weapons. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, looked at the stars and smiled for the first time in years. The hegemony believed it had ended. They were wrong. They believed it had ended. They overlooked what humans truly are. Part 3: The Reckoning. The news spread through the hegemony like fire through dry grass. Humans were alive. Not a handful of scattered survivors, but millions of them, hidden in the corpse of their destroyed civilization. The quarantine zone was not a graveyard. It was a fortress. Hai was long dead, but his successor, unnamed, inherited his fear. She stood before the Council of 17, her 4 eyes wide with barely controlled panic. "We failed," she said. 40 years ago we tried to end the human threat. We did not succeed, and now they have had 40 years to prepare." The council erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted accusations at each other. Some demanded immediate action. Others wanted to negotiate. A few suggested pretending nothing had changed. Silence them all with a gesture. "There is only one option. We must finish what we started. We will send the largest fleet ever assembled into the quarantine zone. This time, we will not stop until every last human is dead." The vote was unanimous. Deep in the void, received word of the coming attack. The information came from Captain, who had secretly contacted the human fleet after letting them escape. She had become a spy, feeding intelligence to the survivors she should have destroyed. "They're sending everything," warned through the encrypted channel. 300 capital ships, 2,000 support vessels, enough firepower to crack 100 worlds. You have maybe 3 months. Called a meeting of all the human faction leaders. It was the first time they had gathered in one place since the silence. Wei came from the remnant, her eyes cold with decades of hatred. She had spent 40 years preparing for war, and she was ready to fight. Admiral came from the fleet, tired and sick from years of running, but still sharp. A man named Cole represented the asteroid colonies, survivors who wanted nothing to do with war or revenge. They just wanted to be left alone. And there were others, dozens of faction leaders representing different groups with different ideas about what humanity should become. They argued for 3 days. Wei wanted blood. "They killed our families, they burned our worlds, they tried to wipe us from existence. Now we have a chance to make them pay. We should strike first, hit there while their fleet is here." Cole shook his head. "And then what? We become the monsters they said we were. We prove them right. They murdered 50 billion people. And becoming murderers ourselves won't bring them back." Listened to both sides. She understood Wei's rage. She felt it herself, burning in her chest like a star, but she also knew where that path led. "We cannot become what they feared," she said when the shouting finally stopped. "If we answer genocide with genocide, we lose something we can never get back, but we also cannot simply forgive. There must be a reckoning. There must be justice. We will defend ourselves. We will make them pay a price for this attack, and then we will offer them a choice." The plan came together slowly. The human factions had never worked together before, but desperation made for strange alliances. They pooled their resources, their knowledge, their technologies. The remnant had developed weapons the hegemony had never seen. The fleet had experience with tactics and movement. The asteroid colonies had engineers who could build anything from nothing. Together, they prepared a trap. The hegemony fleet entered the quarantine zone, expecting to find desperate survivors hiding in ruins. They expected easy targets, scattered populations, broken spirits. They found something else. The Battle of the Shattered Worlds began at what had once been the edge of Earth's solar system. The hegemony admiral ordered his fleet forward, sensors sweeping for human life signs. They found nothing, empty space, debris from the old destruction, dead ships and broken stations. Then the trap closed. Human vessels emerged from the debris field itself. They had hidden inside hollowed-out asteroids, powered down to avoid detection. The remnant had spent years preparing this ambush, positioning their forces, waiting for exactly this moment. The first wave of missiles struck before the hegemony could raise shields. A dozen capital ships died in the opening seconds. What followed was chaos. Human fighters, small and fast and piloted by warriors who had nothing left to lose, tore through the larger hegemony vessels like wolves through sheep. Human weapons, designed over 40 years of desperate innovation, punched through armor that should have been impenetrable. The hegemony fought back. They had numbers and firepower and technology refined over 1,000,000 years. They began to recover from the initial shock. But the humans did not stop. Ships that should have retreated pressed forward. Pilots who should have ejected stayed in their burning fighters, steering them into enemy engines. Crews that should have surrendered fought to the last breath. Admiral commanded from the bridge of the Defiance, now upgraded with weapons that would have terrified her younger self. She directed the battle with the precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment for 4 decades. They expected us to fight like civilized beings, she told her crew. They forgot we have nothing left to lose. 6 hours later, it was over. The hegemony had lost 40% of their combined military force. Ships floated dead in the void. Escape pods drifted through debris fields. The survivors retreated in disorder, their commanders dead or in shock. Humanity had won. But victory came at a terrible price. 3 million humans died in the battle. For a species reduced to perhaps 30 million survivors, it was a catastrophic loss. Wei wept over the casualty lists. Each name was someone she had known, someone who had trusted her, someone who had believed in the cause. Was it worth it? Cole asked quietly. Wei did not answer for a long time. Then she looked up, her eyes red but her voice steady. Ask me again when the hegemony surrenders. Across the galaxy, the news of the battle spread. The unthinkable had happened. The species the hegemony had declared extinct had risen from the grave and delivered the worst military defeat in 1,000,000 years. Fear spread through 17. The humans were coming. The humans had not forgotten. The humans wanted revenge. But that was not quite right. Broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. Her voice calm despite the radiation burns covering half her face. We do not want extinction. We do not want revenge. We want justice. The architects of the Quiet Dawn will answer for their crimes, but we will not become what you feared. We are still human. We still believe in mercy. She paused, and her next words echoed across 1,000 worlds. We are giving you a chance you never gave us. Use it wisely. They believed it had ended. They overlooked what humans truly are. Part 4, the question. The galaxy held its breath. The battle of the shattered worlds had changed everything. The hegemony's military power was broken. Their reputation for invincibility had been shattered along with their fleet. Now the humans had a choice to make, and everyone was watching. Deep in the rebuilt command center of the remnant, the faction leaders gathered once again. The argument that had started before the battle continued now, more intense than ever. Wei stood before the assembly, her voice hard as steel. We have the advantage. The hegemony is weak, confused, afraid. We could strike now while they are still recovering. We have the technology. We have the will. In 10 years, we could reduce their to ash just as they reduced ours. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. 40 years of hatred did not disappear easily. Cole raised his hand. And then what, Wei? We become the new monsters. we become the very thing that justified their genocide in the first place. They killed our families, so we kill theirs. We burn their children because they burned ours. Where does it end? The debate raged for hours. Those who had lost everything wanted blood. Those who had somehow held onto hope wanted peace. And in between, 1,000 shades of. Then the door opened and walked in. The scientist had defected during the battle, bringing with her a cargo ship full of intelligence files and a burning need to make things right. She had spent her life studying humans from afar. Now she stood among them, small and pale and utterly out of place. "I know you have no reason to trust me," she said, her translator turning her whistling language into human words. "My people participated in your destruction. I cannot change that, but I can tell you this. The hegemony is not a single mind. It is 17 species, many of whom were coerced into the quiet dawn. Some have spent 40 years haunted by guilt. Some would welcome the chance to make amends." Wei laughed bitterly. "Guilt does not bring back the dead." "No," agreed, "but revenge will not bring them back either, and it will unite the hegemony against you in a way that nothing else could. Right now they are fractured. If you attack there, they will become whole again, bound together by fear of extinction. Is that what you want?" Silence fell over the assembly. Admiral had been sitting in the corner, wrapped in blankets, her body failing from the radiation she had absorbed during the battle. She was dying, and everyone knew it, but her mind was still clear. "Help me up," she said. 2 officers supported her as she walked to the center of the room. Her voice was weak, but her words carried weight. "I have spent 40 years running," she began. 40 years hiding in the dark, keeping humanity alive through sheer stubbornness. I have watched children grow up without ever seeing a sky. I have buried friends in the cold spaces between stars. I have earned the right to want revenge." She paused, coughing. Blood flecked her lips. "But I have also had 40 years to think. And I know this. Our survival is already the greatest revenge we could ever achieve." She looked at Wei, at Cole, at the hundreds of faces watching her. "Every child born since the silence is a victory. Every song sung in the dark is a defiance. Every moment we continue to exist is proof that the hegemony failed. They said we were too dangerous to live. If we become destroyers, we prove them right. If we answer genocide with genocide, we become exactly what they feared." Wei's jaw tightened. "So we do nothing, we let them go unpunished." "No," eyes hardened. "There must be justice. The architects of the Quiet Dawn, the specific individuals who gave the orders, who designed the weapons, who pushed the buttons, they will answer for their crimes. Not collective punishment. Not revenge against innocent people who were born after the attack, but targeted accountability. Justice, not vengeance." She looked at, "You said some in the hegemony feel guilt. Then they will help us find the guilty ones. They will hand over the war criminals, and in exchange, we will not burn their worlds." The vote took place the next day. Proposal, what historians would later call the doctrine, passed by 7%. It was close, so close, but it passed. Humanity would seek justice, not extinction. Died 3 days later. She passed peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by the crew that had become her family over 4 decades of flight. Her last words were to a young officer, a woman born on the Defiance who had never known any other home. "Keep going," she whispered. "Keep singing, keep hopping, that is how we win." Her body was launched into space in a simple ceremony. As the casket drifted toward a nearby sun, the entire human fleet broadcast a single transmission, the lullaby that had haunted Captain, the song that had reminded her that humans were more than threats. A mother's voice singing her child to sleep, a promise that tomorrow would come. Across the galaxy, billions of beings heard that song. Many of them wept without knowing why. The hegemony had a choice to make. High received the human terms. The war criminals would be handed over for trial. Those who had ordered the genocide, those who had designed the bioweapons, those who had operated the planet crackers. In exchange, there would be peace. Some on the council refused. They would rather fight to the last than admit they had been wrong. But others remembered the battle of the shattered worlds. They remembered the human ships emerging from the debris, the impossible technologies, the warriors who did not stop. And they remembered the song. One by one, the factions began to break. Species that had been forced into the hegemony saw a chance to escape. Governments that had carried guilt for 40 years saw a chance for redemption. The first war criminal was handed over within a month. He was a scientist who had designed the bioweapons, a brilliant mind who had found new and terrible ways to make humans die. He stood before a human court and answered for his crimes. He was not executed. Humanity had abolished the death penalty in their new constitution, but he would spend the rest of his life in prison, surrounded by recordings of what his creations had done. More followed, generals and admirals, politicians and bureaucrats, everyone who had made the quiet dawn possible. And slowly, painfully, the galaxy began to change. The hegemony fractured. 6 species entirely, wanting nothing more to do with the others. New alliances formed, some including humans, some explicitly opposed to them. The galaxy became messier, more complicated, but also more honest. Wei never fully accepted the doctrine. She believed, until her dying day, that humanity had been too merciful. But she followed it anyway because she had given her word, and because somewhere deep inside she knew that had been right. Revenge would have felt good, but it would have cost them their souls. And humanity had lost enough already. They believed it had ended. They overlooked what humans truly are. Part 5: The Return. 20 years after the Battle of the Shattered Worlds, a young woman named Maya stood before the Galactic Council. She was 32 years old, born in the dark years after the Silence, raised on stories of Earth and hope and survival. Her grandmother had been Admiral, the woman who had kept humanity alive through 40 years of flight. Maya had never met her, but she carried her name and her legacy. Today, she was humanity's first official ambassador to the reformed galaxy. The council chamber was vast, designed to make visitors feel small. Representatives from dozens of species sat in tiered rows, their strange bodies and stranger eyes all focused on the human woman at the center. Maya was not afraid. She had grown up on ships hunted by hegemony patrols. She had learned to walk in zero gravity before she learned to walk on ground. Fear was an old friend. She carried 2 items with her. The first was a data crystal containing the names of every human killed in the genocide, all 50 billion of them. The crystal was small enough to fit in her palm, but it contained more sorrow than any single object in history. The second item was a small container of soil. Real Earth soil, preserved from before the shattering, taken from a vault on one of the colony ships that had survived. It was brown and ordinary, but to humans it was sacred. "I come before you today not as a conqueror," Maya said, her voice steady. "Not as a victim, not as a threat. I come as a representative of humanity, a species you tried to destroy and failed." The silence in the chamber was absolute. 60 years ago, your predecessors made a decision. They looked at us and saw danger. They saw a species that grew too fast, adapted too well, dreamed too big, and they decided that the only solution was to kill us all. She held up the data crystal. 50 billion names, 50 billion lives, 50 billion stories that ended in fire and plague and darkness. My grandmother's generation watched Earth die. My mother's generation grew up in hiding, never seeing the sky. My generation has known nothing but the consequences of your fear. A representative from the species shifted uncomfortably. His people had led the genocide. Many of them still believed it had been the right choice. "You might expect me to hate you," Maya continued. "You might expect threats, demands, revenge. And there are humans who want exactly that. There are humans who will never forgive, never forget, never stop hating what you did to us. She paused. I am not one of them. She placed the data crystal on the podium before her. I carry these names not as a weapon, but as a responsibility. Every one of these people deserved to live. Every one of them had hopes and dreams and people who loved them. I cannot bring them back, but I can honor them by building a future they would have been proud of. The container of soil came next. She opened it carefully, letting the representative see the dark earth inside. This is from Earth, from a garden in a city called Nairobi where my grandmother was born. The garden is gone now. The city is gone. The entire planet is gone, broken into pieces that orbit a dying sun. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice did not waver. We cannot go home, we cannot undo what was done, but we can decide what happens next. And we have decided to choose life over death, hope over despair, justice over revenge. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes that had watched her species burn. The war criminals have been tried. Most are dead now from age or their own choices. The last of them, Hai, who ordered the second attempted genocide, died in prison last year. She never apologized. She never showed remorse. But she answered for what she did, and that is enough. A representative raised a hand. Maya recognized her species, the same as, who had defected so many years ago and had since become one of humanity's closest allies. What does humanity want? The representative asked. Why are you here? Maya smiled. It was her grandmother's smile, the one that had kept the crew of the Defiance fighting through 40 years of darkness. We want to live, not just survive, but live. We want to rebuild. We want our children to see skies and oceans and forests, even if they are on new worlds. We want to create art and music and stories. We want to love and laugh and dream. She spread her hands. We are not here for revenge. We are not here to conquer. We are here because you failed to end us, and now you must learn to share the galaxy with what we became. The representative finally spoke. His voice was old and tired. What are you really? We thought we knew. We thought you were a threat, but you endured things that should have destroyed any species, and somehow you emerged. Stronger, kinder, more. What are humans? Maya considered the question. 60 years of human history hung in the silence. The deaths, the survival, the choices made in darkness and in light. We are the species that refuses to stay dead, she said finally. We are the ones who build monuments from our ruins and sing songs about our sorrow and somehow, impossibly, keep going. You looked at us and saw a threat. You should have looked closer. She picked up the container of earth soil and held it against her heart. We are not a threat. We are a promise. That life, once begun, does not end easily. That hope is harder to kill than worlds. That given enough time, enough spite, and enough love, we will find a way. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were dry. 60 years ago, you tried to silence us forever. But tonight, on 100 worlds where humans have rebuilt, children will fall asleep listening to lullabies. The same lullabies their ancestors sang, in the same languages, carrying the same dreams. You destroyed everything we had, and we made something new from the ashes. The chamber was silent. Representatives who had come expecting threats or demands found themselves facing something else entirely, something they did not have a word for. Maya pressed a button on the podium. Music filled the chamber, the same lullaby that Captain had heard in the archives so many years ago. A mother's voice, soft and warm, promising her child that morning would come. This song was written on the Defiance in the years after the silence. A woman named my great-grandmother wrote it for her daughter. She wanted her child to know that even in the darkest night, even when everything seemed lost, there was still a reason to hope. The song ended. The silence that followed was different from before. Something had changed. We are humans, Maya said. We are survivors, and we are here to stay. Far from the council chamber, On a world that humans had named New Hope, children played in fields of alien grass under a purple sky. They laughed and ran and dreamed, just as children had done on Earth for 100,000 years. They did not know about the silence. They did not know about the genocide. They were too young to understand the weight of history. But they knew the lullaby. Every human child knew the lullaby. It was taught in every school, sung in every home, passed down from generation to generation like a sacred trust. Because the lullaby was more than just a song, it was a promise. That morning would come, that hope would survive, that humanity, no matter what the galaxy threw at them, would endure. The stars had tried to kill them, the stars had failed. And now, under a purple sky far from the broken remains of Earth, human children ran and played and dreamed of tomorrow. That was what humans truly were. Not a threat, not a danger, not a species to be feared. A promise that life, once begun, would find a way. Always.